1, 2, 3, and okay. Hello, internet world. It's it's the deer man. Alright, it is the day after Christmas. Christmas was nice. Christmas was good. The wheel of time just keeps rolling along. But it was a good day. So, let me think. And it rained. It was so beautiful that it rained. I love rain so much. Living in the dry ass reaches of Sacramento. I love rain so much. I had this, like, fucking rash or something right here. It's driving me crazy. I think because I'm in the shower, I use these, like, scrubby gloves. I think maybe I scrubbed too hard. I want to go without them for a couple days. Anyway. Hello, baby. So, I'm back again to read a tale. I decided to break up the, because there's another Joshy and Dawson episode. There's two more. A cowboy one and a sci-fi one. And the sci-fi one, I actually brought to full fruition because not only did I write it out, but then I typed it up, I edited it, like, twice or some shit. Did, like, second and third drafts, whereas the two that I read on camera already, those were only first draft readings. So, possibly some of the shitty parts could have been ironed out if I had given them the amount of attention I gave the sci-fi one. That's its own story. I'll get to that when I get there. One day I want to read the zombie stories on camera, even though, like, it'll probably take like 1 million episodes, because they're long. But hey, anyway. Oh yeah, the time. 6:19 a.m. Okay. So, I wanted to read something else to break up the Joshy Dawson train, so we don't get bored of it. Not like anyone is watching these videos anyway. But yeah. Alright, let's see what we get. If it sucks, I can always stop reading it too. The man hunkered down behind the bed, squeezing into the small, sweet space between the bed's frame and the damp, creased wallpaper, peering over the top of the mattress. I feel like I read this, though, in the speed run. It seems familiar. Oh well, it's kind of long, so if it's a dirge, you know, we'll see. Alright, let's see. Squeezing into the small, sweet space between the bed's frame and the damp, creased wallpaper, peering over the top of the mattress, alert, wide-eyed, and body tense, stuck in that moment before the tremble, without release. I did read this before, but okay. The sinews down his arms ached, his heart beat in a steady hub that ran down the center of his abdomen and into his groin. He could have rolled against the floor, ground his teeth, or beat his hands to try and shake off the terrible feeling of suspension. But not at this moment. This time he stayed poised and ready. It was coming this time. He was sure of it. As he waited, he made the most of his time. Eyes switched from the door to the wall, to the small space under the bed, and to each corner of the room. No telling where it would come from. No telling how it would ambush. But knowing the way these things happened, it was most likely to come from whichever spot his eyes happened to neglect. It's like he's in a fucking survival horror game or something. No, not just likely, it would happen. He was sure of it. And so he tried to move his eyes as much as possible, keep it at bay, or just try to catch it in the act. Maybe if he was lucky enough, he would. The tension, the adrenaline, the way his body was spring-locked and waiting to bounce into action. He should have felt so alive, clinging to every moment the way he was, and yet the life slipped through his fingers as he stared too hard and too close, with that crushing pressure behind his eyeballs, at the cold and clammy light bulb illuminated room. He looked too hard and could only see the particles, not the whole. When was the last time his body and mind had moved at the same speed of the world? When was the last time he had been at ease? He rubbed his fingers against the metal of his gun. He's got a gun, okay? If only he could shiver. If he could just tremble and shake, some of these goosebumps might be released. But he couldn't force it. He couldn't bring it to fruit. So he had to be careful of that tight trigger finger. Just wait, he said to himself. Just wait and it will come. And when it comes, I'll be rid of it. There was no reason for the day to be any different from the night. But it was different, and the differences were far from limited to simply light against dark. The man could see through that clearly. It wasn't merely different, it was two separate worlds. Things crept and vibrated and bred in nighttime that could not exist in the world of the day. But as the sun rose outside the walls of his apartment, those slithering things were snuffed out, and yet he survived, sweating, scratching, but alive. Again he had waited them out. He tucked the gun under his pillow and stood to his feet. The man pulled up in his company's cobalt blue truck. It was a clean blue truck, large enough in age, but polished just enough. Polished by the man's own hands, as the company required, and the hard work paid off, the time spent loitering around the company parking lot with that rag in his hand and a cigarette in his mouth, a bucket of soapy water at his feet, the heat of the sun on his back on good days, cold fog seeping into his flesh on bad days. No rush in his posture in his arm, just polishing until he was done, and his brain wandering somewhere out in space. Worlds away from this monotonous ending cleaning, away from the slow circles of his arm turning at the elbow and his eyes dead, staring blankly and relaxed as if he was already at peace. Unknowing to the long ash that was falling off his cigarette. Until at last, after this eternity, something would call him back to his mortal body and summon his mind away from that other world. His eyes would focus and the shine on the hood of the truck would catch his vision. His eyes would blink and catch life again, and for now he would be pulled away from that world where polishing the truck was endless. Everything in life itself came down to that rag and the motions of his arm. It was a very clean little neighborhood, and that's why the cleanliness and the blueness of the truck fit in here. As if it was designed for little peach-colored and mint-colored suburban houses with little lawns and little fences and little gates. It wasn't always this way. Sometimes he stuck out like a black sheep. But today, it was as if the truck had come home. I thought what it reminds me of, he thought to himself, those little plastic toys they had when I was a kid. They looked like each one was carved out of a solid block of plastic. They were very square, like angular, but they remind me of back then. They were always either bold colored or pastel. It's kind of what this neighborhood is. It's square, but I like it. He parked the truck on the curb and stepped out, adjusted his blue uniform just a little bit, walked to the door and rang the bell. His customer opened the door and looked him over. She was a skinny blonde lady, a typical little plastic specimen for this plastic house. She was the doll that came with the house of the set. He looks normal enough, she thought to herself. He was not too tall and was a little bit thin, she estimated, in his jumpsuit. Not as big as the men she liked, so her husband wouldn't be jealous. He had brown hair, a few inches long all around, not slicked down or anything, just loose. He had a small mustache and a bare bit of stubble, and his eyes were brown. He looks tired, she thought to herself. Maybe he doesn't like this job. He had rough skin, not very dark, but darker than hers, and his name tag read Haves. I remember role-playing as this guy. Just a nothing guy. I guess that's what the story's conveying. Good morning, he speaks to her. What are you doing, Quincy? What the hell is going on over there? Quincy. You wanna see what he's doing? What are you doing, Quincy? What is that all about? What? What are you unhappy about? Or, I don't even know what you're feeling. What are you doing, boy? What the hell's wrong with you? Oh, you just want to get up there? You want to get up onto the dresser? You're not getting in there. Besides, that's a towel drawer. What do you want in there? That's not even the drawer with the catnip. So I don't know what he's tripping about. There you go. I want to get up there. Alright. Where was I? Okay, good morning, he speaks to her. He can feel the oddness already in the air. The words felt foreign coming out, like a wrong line spoken on stage. But all the same, he smiled and held his toolbox with one calloused hand. She took his greeting, though, without a problem, and smiled. God, she looks relaxed, he thought to himself. If only he could get some of that relaxation. If only he could feel settled into this space and time, as if there was a niche made for him. Not so displaced and wrong. It teased him then. It felt so attainable, as if he could merely reach out and take it from her like a gift. I know what that means. But it teased him. He knew better. He smiled back at her, and then it happened. As if by magic, but just like clockwork. She led him into the house and started to explain her problem. The oven wouldn't start, or maybe it was the light that wouldn't turn on, even though she had already replaced the bulb. Whatever it was, his other half absorbed it, listened and understood everything. Talked and even joked a little with her. Assured her he would fix the problem. And that left Haves himself mute and hidden in the background, but free to peer about the house, taking in all the little details, passing the time. If only she knew. I don't know anything about gas or electric, but my partner's good for it. I'm lucky. He's a great repairman. Can you imagine if we were both lost? What a disaster that would be. But he takes care of it. He takes care of both of us. Haves had been dreaming. He didn't know how long he'd been tinkering with that oven, but suddenly there was a sinking feeling of shadow in the room. Something hovering over him and making the space claustrophobic. He looked up quickly, and standing in the doorway with crossed arms and a skeptic half-smile was a younger man. He had black hair and blue eyes, and a white thermal shirt, and more than anything seemed to be expecting something. Hey, Haves greeted him. He even smiled at the boy and put down his tool for a moment to straighten up in his kneeling pose. He offered a broad, rough hand. How you doing? The boy scoffed at his hand. Haves quickly put it away. Are you Miss Lauren's son? Haves asked this time. The boy just shrugged. Yeah, something like that. He surely sounds young, Haves thought to himself. That was when the second young man appeared, just as Haves was standing awkwardly, staring halfway down, and ruminating in that transparent state. The sudden jolting apparition who popped out from around the corner was, in a fast moment, suddenly not an apparition at all. He was real and vibrant flesh, and collided Haves' feet smack hard on the ground. What the fuck? Waking him roughly from his conscious dream world and making reality suddenly seem tangible and solid. Am I seeing double? Haves wondered to himself as he stared at the two wiry boys in front of him. But as the second one turned to whisper to the first, Haves noticed the difference in their clothes, the minute separations in the hair and skin, the fact that the one who had newly appeared was carrying some electronic box under his arm, something black and shiny plastic, with buttons and grooves and slots, ports for plugs and wires. Hey, Haves shouted out, stop, stop. For a fast, tense moment, the two snapped matched, identical glances at one another, so synchronated that it was not even two glances, but a single one, shared by two people. In a flash, they sprang off their heels and raced for the door, kicking up the carpet and shredding past the walls. Every serene and carefree painting and photograph that was framed along the hall was so belovedly oblivious to the chaos which roared past them. Haves barreled after them with long, clumsy strides and blundering feet, holding himself up by the walls when his numb body floundered, and he desperately heaved himself back upright. But leap by leap, he made it along, and suddenly, before he even knew it, he was hurling through the open doorway, squinting his eyes against the blinding white of daytime. Hey, Haves bellowed out hoarsely. I hate the word bellowed. It's just like, unless you're talking about a big bull moose or something, or a drill sergeant, it's not really appropriate, I feel like, but okay. Haves bellowed out hoarsely, breathlessly. Hey you, stop. Come back. By miracle alone, he blinked his eyes and regained a little of his vision, however tilted and surreal it was. And in his line of sight, there were the two young men racing off down the block. Haves lurched down the driveway and past his truck, beating the pavement, hounding after the pair. Come back, you sons of bitches. Come back, help, somebody help, they're robbing me. Oh, I did read this before. This is the Cherry Vega thing. Cherry Vega was parked on the curb in his old tan car with a cracked back window and the missing door handle, leaning back on the starchy, stiff cigarette burn. A ripped driver's seat. Leaning back in his long, ratty blonde hair and his pudgy, overweight belly propped forward, cigarette hanging off his pink lip, and ash falling onto his uncomfortably tight blue jeans. One white earphone was dangling pathetically out of his ear and resting on his chest while he grumbled, frustrated, at his MP3 player and tried to smack some life back into it with the edge of his hand. This is when all my characters used to smoke, because even though I have never been a smoker, I've smoked cigarettes before, but I've never been like a smoker, like, oh, I have to buy a pack, like I have to have a cigarette every day, I have to always have a pack on me. I've never been like that, but my characters, you know, I used to be stereotypical American and think like all cool people smoke cigarettes all the time, so all my characters have to be cool and smoke cigarettes. If you don't smoke them, you're not cool. Anyway. Where was I? One way, blah, blah, blah. Resting on his chest while he grumbled, frustrated, blah, blah, blah. No. Tried to smack some life back into it with the edge of his hand. It's funny. Never would he have heard Haves, but by some miracle and happening of consequence, he was there at that very moment. His window was down, his engine was running. Help! Cherry snapped upright in his seat and looked around, affected instantly, unconsciously, like the ring of a doorbell on a house dog. Stop, thieves! It only took Cherry a moment to pin his gaze down on the figures across the street, the two fast-fleeing boys, and Haves behind them, more delayed, and his exhaustion showing, but determined. Cherry didn't have to think about it. Already before his mind could start to formulate a plan, and the gears in his head cranked forward and yearned for grease, his little compact hand was already snatching fast in a snap into the switch of his old car, thrusting it into gear. And this is also before I got my driver's license, so I actually had no idea how to drive. I just used a lot of car driving terms to make it sound like, but you can probably tell I didn't have any fucking idea what it means to drive. Thrusting it into gear, cranking the wheel to pull out, stomping hard on the gas. His tires screeched banshee-like. That's just like in the lighthouse. He screeched banshee-like in the storm. Against the concrete road, narrowly breezing past a corner-on-corner collision with the nearest parked car in front of him. I probably should have said I think I was like 23 when I wrote this, because I kind of remember it. Out the window went his cigarette, as fast as he could turn his head, and spat, the adrenaline coursing under his skin, over the bones, fast enough and hard enough that he didn't care if it was new and white and shiny, right in the prime of its cigarette life. And snuffed out before its ounce for ounce value could even begin to be utilized. Where was I? The adrenaline, the rush, it growled into his ears, so close and so intimate that he couldn't hear anything else. Nothing but that bellowing, echoing that drum of primal hunting desire. The drive to hunt, to stalk, pounce and tackle, and grab and kill, and drive his teeth in deep, which flowed out, radiated from the misty density of dark jungle of his brain, and down his nerves and ligaments, and down to his gripping hands in his car. Momentarily gripping the wheel with just one set of fingers, he ripped the small headphones out of his ears and threw clumsily the entire little apparatus into the passenger seat. I think Cherry Vega is the first of my characters to have an iPod, because I thought iPods were the lamest shit ever, and I didn't want to admit that they existed. I'm like, no, CD players forever, man. Where was I? Then in the next second, he snatched back onto the steering wheel with both palms, squeezing until his knuckles showed yellow with hard pink lines. Spitting rapid, fast glances out his open window, back and forth, between watching out the windshield, he raced the car ahead of the thieves and rounded the nearest corner. Swerving with a deafening haphazard screech in a crooked position, Cherry inadvertently drove out one front wheel upon the curb, been there, before grinding the car in a park. Oh, 20 minutes. Alright, well, this story obviously has a lot of fucking descriptions. Every little thing goes on and on and on. I mean, it's... I don't know. Some people like that. Like, my mom says she kind of likes stuff like that because, she, you know, it gives a full picture or whatever. But for me, I'm just like, okay, I don't need to go on and on for 2 paragraphs about washing a car and, like, the movement of his arm, the rag, the sun, wiping the car, oh, everything was wiping the car. You know, it's just like a whole song. And I'm just like... I used to waste a lot of time, I guess, but, you know, I don't know, like, I just don't like that style of writing anymore, but it's okay, you know, just like I said in my last video, the reflection on the fucking Terminator fan fiction, like, however you write is however you write, you know what I mean, so, yeah, as long as you can fill, I mean, obviously back then, I think this stuff is kind of boring when the description goes on and on like that, but at least I could fill a page, you know? So, alright, until next time.